Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we talk about new player stuff for the whole month of February. I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm your other host, Ted Bannock, and I love talking about the game and its rules. And we have a really spectacular set of episodes coming out for you this month that I am really looking forward to.
Was that you throwing it over to me?
It was.
Okay,
yes.
I was waiting
can
for
now
the normal thing. So, for anybody who doesn't know, every February we try to put out an extravaganza month where we put out a whole passel of shows, and this February is no different. And we would really probably be not doing our job if we didn't acknowledge the release of the revised core set. So because we are doing that, we are going to take the month and really focus on things to help out the new player. Not that veteran players can't handle having a refresher of sorts of all of these things. Maybe something will strike your fancy. And as always, we are trying to inspire people to play the game and deck build and do the right thing here with the game. But we also use this month as our support drive, I guess. We're driving and hoping that you will support us. Normally we just kind of passively hope that you do things, but this month of February we're going to ask you, if you're listening to this, to do us a couple of favors. If you're listening to us on your podcatcher, we would love for you to subscribe to us or rate us or review us. By doing all of those things, that helps push our podcast a little further up the line so that maybe new players can see this, and people who didn't know that Card Talk exists could pop up and maybe they could see it in their search for stuff about Lord of the Rings card game. If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We want to get all you subscribers out there, and we want to interact with you and comment and talk about things on the show that you see, that you like, that you didn't like. I mean, Ted is super controversial over there all the time, so, argue with him. Another thing you could do,
Thank you.
the link will be right down there. You can check out the blog. We have a blog that has articles, review articles. So every time we put out a show on a card, Matt over at the blog reviews the card in writing. So that's a good way. And you can also follow us there. There's a follow button on the blog. And again, if you're new, that's a great resource. And some people, the blog is relatively new. So if you've been around since the beginning of the game in 2011, follow us there, and you can comment and interact there. The last thing that I would love for you to consider is supporting us on Patreon. The link is right down here again below us, and it says, and basically this is the best way for you to really tell us how much you appreciate what we're doing for you in the community. Helps keep the lights on here at the podcast. Also helps us cover the hosting fees and costs of running the blog. And every year we give away swag. Every patron gets a little bit of swag, and anybody who is at the $5 level and up per month gets the big swag, as long as you are a patron between April and Con of the Rings. So Con of the Rings happens in October, and usually Ted or myself or both of us are there. And we're trying to talk Matt into coming, and Grant has to fly from Great Britain to get here. But at some point, it's good. But after saying all of that, I will say that we here at Card Talk are going to dedicate the next several episodes to discussing the phases of the game in detail, so that maybe if you're a new player, you can find out what's happening in each phase, some of the specifics, maybe some specific card interactions that can happen, and so Ted will probably handle a lot of that, and I'm going to talk about kind of the theme and the theories behind like how this is representing Tolkien's book and adventuring in general. So So that's what we're doing. And today, Ted, what phase are we going to be talking about? Or maybe phases?
Yeah, thanks, David. So our goal here is, as David mentioned, for both new players, especially, but also veteran players, with the launch of the revised core set, to do a rules review of the phases of the game and how turn order goes. So if you're still listening to this because you were confused about the resources and planning phase, those are two separate phases in the game. We're going to be covering both of those in today's episode. And again, if you're a veteran player, maybe there's something you might learn about those phases that you overlook because it is easy to do in this game. So we're going to start by talking about the first phase of the game, which is the resource phase. And generally, the way the game works, there is sort of this framework of events that has been defined and put into place. It is in the rules reference of I believe, of the revised core set, which is available online. If you have questions about rules, or if you need to sort of access the rule book, rather, Fantasy Flight puts all that information on their support page. So you can download a PDF of the rules reference and the learn how to play guide and have it on your computer or look it up on your phone or something if you don't have the printed copy handy. So a lot of what we're going to be doing is talking about the phases as the turn begins and going through the frameworks of events. So the first one, phase one, the resource phase. Basically the phase begins, and immediately after the phase begins, you gain resources. The way you gain resources is each hero gains one resource. The rulebook does allow you to play with anywhere from 1 to 3 heroes, according to the rules. You will most commonly be playing 3 heroes. That's sort of the standard setup. So each single one of those heroes is going to gain one single resource at this point in the game. There are going to be abilities and cards that gain you additional resources, but that doesn't happen yet. This is just sort of the framework, the base of the game gives each hero one resource. And you additionally get to...
Oh, I was going to continue, and then when you have your break, let me know.
You additionally also get to draw one single card after gaining resources.
And so what I would do with this is, when I think about what this kind of represents in an adventuring Tolkien sort of sense, is, you've kind of woken up for the day and you're ready to start out a new day of adventuring, right? So you need some sort of commodity in the game, so that's where the resources come in. But you can think about it as, you have the energy now to spend time gathering your supplies, or spend energy gathering the people to help follow you, or something like that. And that's where the drawing cards comes from, is that you draw a card, and that's kind of like the supplies that you have available to you. Maybe if you're in a little town, and these are the things that you could buy on, and maybe you're in Bree and you're looking for some supplies in Bree, and so obviously it's quest dependent on where you would start, but that's always what I think about when I think about this resource phase. There's an action window right at the end of the resource phase, but I'm not sure that there's much, when you're playing the core set, I'm not sure that there's much in that action window that you would have to or want to do, Ted. Is that?
Yeah, so we should briefly, for this first episode, and we'll probably give some type of reminder for the rest of this series, we should briefly talk about what an action window means. So there are various points of the game labeled as an action window, and an action window is essentially anytime you can take an action. And actions are they're pretty much labeled as such in the game. Most events, most heroes that have abilities that are actions, they are labeled actions. And I'm trying to pull up an example of one of each of those.
Denethor.
Yes, Denethor.
Hero
Denethor's a great example.
Denethor has an action, and you can exhaust Denethor to look at the top card of the encounter deck. And then you can move that card to the bottom of the encounter deck. So you'd have to do that in a specific action window. And
Yep.
I guess it wouldn't be horrible to do that here in the resource phase if you needed to. That's not maybe the best time to play it, but that's an action that you could take here.
You know what, David? So I've been playing this game since it's come out, and actually doing it. And well, there's other times you could do it that we're going to be getting to. But doing Denethor's action now is actually a really, really smart move that I had never actually considered, because the second phase of the game, which we're also covering in this episode, is going to be the planning phase. And the planning phase is essentially where you set up your whole turn. And Denethor's ability to specifically scry informs you of the challenges you'll be facing this coming up turn. But we'll get into that in just a minute. But to finish up about action windows, they could be abilities printed on cards, or they can also be cards themselves. More than likely, they're going to be event cards. And so you may have an event card that has an action on it, and you could take that action when you want to. So an example of that would be Lorien's Wealth. Lorien's Wealth is a 3-cost lore event, and it says action. Target player draws 3 cards. So during this action window, you can pay for this card using 3 resources, target yourself or one of your cohorts, your co-players, and let them draw 3 cards. And you could do that in this action window or any other action window that you want somebody to draw cards in, for example. And there are many different events. There are many different actions that give you a plethora of,
positive effects that you will want to have to use in the game.
Thank you.
And I will say this, because there is one action that is relegated to a specific phase in the game. And if you look at your card, Feint, that is a combat action, which means you can only use it during the combat phase. In the core set, there is no resource action cards. So there's a quest action and there's a combat action, but there's no resource action cards in the core set to worry about. So that means that you can, as long as it says action and it's not specified which phase, you can take that in any action window that you wish.
Yep, that's a great point, David. And as the game grows and your card pool expands, there might be further restrictions on when you can play cards, and those restrictions will be listed on the card. And so, for example, Feint says combat action, meaning you can use it in any combat window during the combat phase.
Right.
So that pretty much covers the resource phase. It's 1 resource per hero. So that's going to be 3 resources under most circumstances, 3 heroes. You get 1 card, start of every single turn, and then you have an action window, an opportunity to take certain actions and play certain cards before it moves into the next phase, which is called planning.
And the resource phase is typically not very exciting. It usually only takes a couple of seconds to get through the resource phase, even when you're playing multiplayer. So don't expect every phase to be super exciting. So
that's a great point.
So what is the planning phase, Ted? This is the specialist of all the phases, I think.
Yeah, and let me see if there's a more broad work definition that the rule book gives. I'm not sure if I have one handy, but so the planning phase is essentially like, this is your main phase and main time to prep for the upcoming turn and all future turns. Like, this is the time you basically have free reign. There's not the deck itself is not acting against you. There's usually not mechanics like cards you have to read or worry about. It's sort of the player's time to read through all their cards, take all their actions, play cards, talk strategy with.
It is what it is. It's actually where the players, if you're playing multiplayer, plan usually for the whole rest of the phase, and then the rest of the turn, and then the players will then have that blow up when the encounter deck starts doing its stupid things, right?
Yeah. Yep. This is where you are preparing against, your adventure for the day and Sauron's onslaught and accomplishing your mission, whether it's, doing Journey through Mirkwood or Passes through Mirkwood or Journey down the Anduin. You're getting prepared for whatever stage of the quest you're on.
Right.
So the planning phase is as follows. Basically, the phase begins, and then the whole phase is an entire action window for the first player. It goes in player order. So if you're playing multiplayer, let's say David and I are both playing a game, there is a first player marker that you pick at the start of the game. If I was first player, I would take all my actions first. And then when I'm done with all of my cards and playing what I want to play, it'll be David's turn to do what he wants to do.
And I would say that this is, they call it in the rule book, I think, a special planning phase, right?
Yeah, they call it a special action window.
Special action window. Sorry, I apologize. Because this is the only time in the game where you can pay for and play allies and attachments. There's other card effects like sneak attack that allow you to play cards out of your hand. But
yeah,
this is the
cards
only time
will always let you break the rules, right?
But this
That's
is
sort of the golden rule. There's cards, but if you're not doing that, this is the normal time for those cards.
And this is the only time. This is the only time you can play allies and the only time you can play attachments. So if you're holding an attachment like a forest snare, you can't play it later in the turn. You have to play it now if you're going to play it during this turn, which is common to forest snare, the hill troll, and one of the mistakes after it engages. Right, but you have to wait for... You can't pay for a forest snare later. You have to pay for it during this turn.
Yep.
Or during this phase. I apologize.
Yeah. So there, as David said, there may be some cards that let you maybe do some things out of order or take some type of do something special with attachments or special with allies, but now is the time to play them. And so you can. It's an open action window, so you can take any action you want to do, including ones on your heroes. So if you have a hero, for example, like Barivor from the core set, Barivor has an action. You exhaust Barivor to choose a player. That player draws 2 cards, limit once per round. So if I'm getting geared up and I'm like, I don't really have very many cards in my hand, as I'm getting ready to spend my resources, I could exhaust Barivor, or if David was playing Barivor, he could target me because it's an open action window.
I would never target Ted with... I'm just kidding. Of course I can target Ted.
Just to give you an example, if you're playing cooperatively, David could exhaust his Barivor and then let me draw 2 cards while I'm taking my planning phase. And the most important thing to note, or the most common mistake when you're playing more than one player, multiplayer, is that the order does matter. Because technically, if I'm first player, I play my cards and then David plays his. So if I am done with my planning phase and David starts taking his turn, and then David decides later in his planning phase to let me draw cards, if it's an ally or an attachment, I'm done playing for the turn. I can't play anything because my time has passed, essentially. So unless you can think of another way to put that, it's like you have your planning phase, and same thing. Then if you have 4 players, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4 in that order, and it matters basically. So it's a really important pro tip is just take things phase by phase, take things slowly. Don't play a whole bunch of cards all at once. Like play the, get the card out of your hand, pay its resources, put it on the table, and then make sure there's no effects or resolve any effects if that card is coming into play. Whatever the action says to do, make sure you fully draw. If Bearvor says draw 2 cards, draw both cards before you draw one and then decide to play it. Something really simple like that.
Right. Yeah. To think about this in terms of theme, I know that you guys probably have figured that out, but I always think of the planning phase as the time. Not only are you planning with the people you're playing with, but it's also the time where, if you're putting yourself in the role of the heroes, this is where the heroes are saying, well, who or what do I want available to me right now to accomplish the goal? And so, yes, you have them in the store. The store is your hand, but then you actually need to pay for them to put them on the table so that you can use them. And so that's usually what I think about thematic wise there. So the resource phase is not very exciting, but it's made up for with all the fun of the planning phase. Ted and I have played live several times where we've spent many, many minutes talking about, well, I'm going to play this, and then, and then we're going to go on, and, then this is going to happen, and then that's going to happen. That's the fun of playing this game cooperatively. The cooperative card game aspect is that, you have that planning phase where you're making sure that you're ready for this whole turn coming up.
That's a really great point, David. It is fun because you might have a card in your hand that it's an attachment like Protector of Lorien, and Protector of Lorien is a lore attachment that lets a player increase a hero's willpower or increase their defense. And that might be really great to plan someone else's hero, and you won't really, you might want to ask what hero they want it played on. You can openly, there is a rule on Table Talk, and the rules basically talk about everything. You can talk about cards, talk about strategy. You just can't forcefully tell another player what to do as the rule book is written.
Right. I can't grab your cards and play them for you.
Yeah.
And actually,
but fun is the game.
As a little aside, I think Ted and I have both been in these situations, in opposite situations. For me, it's no fun to be the guy that tells everybody what to do or lets people tell me what to do. I enjoy making decisions for my hand, and then Ted making decisions for his hand, and then anything that happens, that's going to happen between the two of us, we talk about it and figure out what's best. But I'm typically not the guy that's going to say, oh, Ted, you need to play this, you need to do this, you need to do that. Like, that's not fun for me to play. Yep. Basically, that would be me playing two-handed and Ted is just the guy holding the other deck. Yep. So I have the most enjoyment when I am playing true, like, multiplayer where everybody is on equal footing doing all the stuff.
Yeah. And just to note this for all you solo players, if you're picking up this game, you picked it up and your intention is just to learn the game and play by yourself. It's really important. David plays a fair amount of solo games, and I played quite a few as well. And it's really important to play each of these phases one at a time. And again, take your time, because you're thinking about so many things. You're like, what am I going to play? What's the encounter deck going to do? How are these cards going to interact with each other? My cards and then the enemy cards. And all those thoughts are just happening at the same time. And it's very easy to just miss something. You'll miss text on your own cards. You'll miss reading text on the quest cards or enemy card. You'll just miss something. It's very easy to lose track of things. It's like you're going to gain one resources and then you're going to draw, and then you're supposed to draw a card, and then you start playing cards, but you might gain resources and start playing cards. And then you'll be like, oh, did I draw a card? And maybe you already did. And then you draw a second card by mistake because you weren't sure if you did it or not.
Right.
or you skip drawing a card because
And
you
we
just
all
forget.
make those mistakes. Even now, Ted's been playing for 12 years now. The game came out in 2011, and so this is 2022. So that's, I guess, 11, maybe 12, almost 12. Well,
Yeah,
I don't know, whatever. And then
it's been out for a decade.
yeah,
at least,
and
so.
I've been playing for 7 years, and we still make rules mistakes. Like, that's part of the game, but minimizing those mistakes, and those mistakes that are game crushing is what we're hoping to do here, is kind of help you minimize the mistakes and maximize your enjoyment of the game.
Yeah. So these two phases are really, really important. The resource phase is just something very passive, but the planning phase is very, very, very active. And you want to get everything set up and make sure you spend the resources you want to and save what you want to, because you also have to keep in mind that there are upcoming action windows. So as we go through the rest of these episodes and the rest of the turns, the rest of the phases coming up to questing and traveling and combat, you might have cards you want to play during those phases because there are events in your hand that are very helpful. So now is also the time to think about the resources you need for those phases as well, and actions you want to take. And you want to start thinking about what heroes are going to be used for what actions, who's going to quest, who's going to attack, who's going to defend. And then if you're playing cooperatively, does my co-op partner need help attacking or help questing? And this is the time to talk about all those things.
Right.
And honestly, a big part of the enjoyment comes from the game is, my Middle Earth team and David's Middle Earth team coming together to defeat whatever the scenario is.
Right. It's so much fun. And the best laid plans that you make during the planning phase all get ruined in the next.
And then they all go sideways.
Right. And that's even more fun.
It's even more fun. Yeah.
When you're like, how do you recover from this? Right. Right. So,
but that's pretty much it. Those the tips and that's the framework of those two phases. And Dave and I wanted to share our pro tips about things to do. And it's mostly just don't skip any of these pieces and do them in order. It's more important in this phase than it's important in all phases, but it's really easy to just miss something in these two, and then your whole game can slide downhill.
Mm-hmm. That is true. Well, we appreciate you joining us for this episode in our extravaganza month of New Player February. And everybody join us again very soon as we talk about more phases in the game. Have a great day, everybody.
Do you love the content? Here's what you can do to stay connected. Become a patron. The money collected through Patreon goes into keeping the lights on here at the podcast. We love our patrons, and you can join at many different levels. Visit patreon.com/cardtalk2018. You can subscribe to us, whether you're watching our YouTube channel or you're listening to us in your favorite podcatcher. Hit the subscribe button to get notifications of all our new episodes. Didn't know we were an audio podcast? Find us by searching Card Talk to get access to our 120 plus regular episodes. Didn't know we were a video channel? Find us by searching Card Talk LOTR LCG on YouTube. And there you can find not only our regular episodes, but you can find our bonus playthroughs and other content related to the game. Want to get a hold of Ted, Grant, or myself? Feel free to email the podcast at cardtalk2018@gmail.com.